Matthew Boyd from Staccato in Launceston. I wanted to do a bit of a follow-up video on my interpretation of Wylde's throwing the guards exercise. There's been some good questions and a wonderful response video from Jay from the Manitoba Broadsword Academy, and there's just some points I'd like to go over again. So here goes. My interpretation of the movements that occur with the arm in this drill, I believe he's creating a balanced order of movement. So our first movement is in this direction. Okay, we've got a coming to an inside guard. Okay, so our sword will be describing a diagonal like this. From there, we're coming to a outside guard, which the sword movement is in this direction. Now, from the outside, we're rolling around to a medium, which is the sword movement in this direction. From the medium, we then have, in my interpretation, a horizontal movement of the sword coming in this direction up into our George, and from the George, so to cast the point from you and come around in a great circuit, which then has a movement in this direction. That looks like a balanced series of movements to me. If we don't interpret it that way, we don't have that balance, and I think that's part of what Wylde is doing, and we'll see the same sort of balance come out in his quarterstaff drill. Also had a question about his footwork in this drill. He says you start the drill in a wide stance, and so we've got feet like this. They may be more pointing both forward like an 11 rather than as V'd like this, but I believe there's a reason for this. Now he says that when you make your inside guard, he wants you to step into a position like this, where you are in a line from the middle of the left foot. And he says, specifically mentions toes pointed out slightly. He describes the same footwork in his small sword section, saying that it should look like a Roman eye. Okay, so a Roman eye looking like this. So this is one foot, well, the other way, one foot, and here's the other foot, but extended out. And then return to this position. When it's applied, his stepping is diagonal, and I believe there's a number of reasons for that. He makes a big point about a traversing step, and he says you gain several advantages if you do this. But then he doesn't go on to say what those advantages are. He's leaving you to interpret that. Or it should, in his mind, it should be obvious to you what those advantages are. So here's the line of defense towards your opponent. With his wide stance, you're straddling the line. Now, when you step, you're making a diagonal movement initially in this direction, but this foot's going to swing around and your new line will be to your opponent in this direction. He doesn't describe going this way. That doesn't mean he doesn't, but in this step and creating your line this way, or playing circularly as he has it, what you're doing is making the most of your hanging guard. If I was stepping this way, hanging guard, the outside of your right arm becomes more exposed. If you're stepping this way, you're going to protect yourself under your hanging guard much easier, which is fundamental to understanding Wylde. He says, after you make any attack, you should be returning to a guard as quick as you can, and specifically he mentions recovering under a hanging guard. So he's wanting you to make your motion, stepping this way, in general, not all the time, and recover with a hanging guard. He says this is your absolute surest way. And I think that's why the drill with the larger motion where you're protecting your head is for this, in covering your head as you recover. It builds the right instinct when you're slipping, which is, I think, one of the main points of this drill. When you slip, he says you have to advance your arm so that your arm is quite out of reach of your opponent, and then to return your cut after that. So that's why I don't think it's such a small movement for this drill. I think he's trying to build up the response so that when you make your cut, you're recovering under a hanging guard with as much safety as possible. If we look at the footwork in the drill, it reveals something that's interesting that it doesn't seem to occur many places, which is that his system seems to be played on the diagonal, circularly, but diagonal to the line of defense. So if we're in our start of our drill shape, in a full body, and we advance our arm, come behind our head, and come to our inside, naturally, if we're to have that foot shape of a Roman I, with our toes pointed out, this is the direction we're moving. I don't believe that it's a step straight in. Okay. So we're stepping out diagonally, and we're coming back to our outside guard, inside guard still with the diagonal step, St. George, and hanging. Now, if we're to apply this to actual sparring or fighting, there should be a corrective step with our left foot. Okay, so if we're starting in our outside and we make this step, this foot will be compassing around to give us our new shape and a new line to our opponent. Now, from here, because Wylde says if on any offence that you make, you should be recovering with a hanging guard. So turn your wrist to hanging and recover. Just wanted to look at some of the things that characterise Wylde's system. Now, if we were to begin in a normal inside guard, like this, and outside, seems reasonable, but Wylde says to make your body as hollow as possible. What does that mean? Okay, it means to make a void here. Okay, so he wants it's quite a low guard, but what we're doing is removing our low targets. Now he does this with small sword as well, which is even more exaggerated. Small sword, inside guard, outside, and the medium guard that he recommends. That's been the best. So inside, hollow body, or hand here. Outside, he also talks about waiting on a full outside guard with your body as hollow as possible. This is his lead up to slipping. So with these extended guards, what it does is remove our lower targets. Okay? Our arm is well out there, our sword extended, our opponent will have to come in, risking themselves if they want to attack anything lower. Our hand, which is protected by our hilt, is out there providing almost like a buckler, excellent protection for our arm and body. Now, he also talks about the medium guard. Now, there may be some conjecture whether that's point on or point up. He says the medium guard is good because they'll risk great danger if they come in against it. Now, if your point's forward and your hilt as high as your chin, this is not a nice structure. Okay? So when he says they're risking themselves, it's my opinion that what he's saying is they're risking a time of the hand wrist cut straight onto whatever comes into range if they encroach upon medium guard with the point up. Studying Wylde's system, it's not a system to use a heavy sword with. You'll quickly tire with these extended guards. So it's better to have a light sword, one that you can maintain your arm out, extended. Highland broadsword or silver sword suitable for silver system aren't the most appropriate. We want something lighter, very much spadroonish, a light cut and thrust sword. Wylde says that if you can get a sword that cuts as well as it thrusts, and he said he's had several in his time, you have great odds against small sword fighters, and you can fight equally with broadsword fighters.